In our headlines on this Thursday, July 23rd, here in South Korea. A public discussion on real estate takes place earlier in the day, chaired by President Lee Jae-myung, who vowed to turn public feedback into policy ahead of the government's announcement of new housing measures. Meanwhile, preliminary findings by the central bank show the South Korean economy expanded 0.6% in the second quarter of this year on the back of solid exports. And Trade Minister Kim Jong-kwan is in the U.S. as he says talks for the first tangible deal under South Korea's massive U.S. investment plan are nearing the finish line. President Lee Jae-myung wrapped up a rare public forum on real estate earlier on this Thursday, acknowledging the importance of housing policies shaped by public input as affordability remains a top concern. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
Runaway housing prices due to limited supply and speculation. That was President Lee Jae-myung's diagnosis of Korea's real estate market as he convened a policy forum with experts and members of the public at the Blue House on Thursday.
모든 사람들이 집이 사놓으면 돈 되더라. 빌려서라도 사자. 인생을 걸고 집을 사서 그거밖에 돈 버는 길이 없다 이렇게 생각하고 모두가 거기에 몰려서 이렇게 되면 언젠가는 문제가 생기겠죠. 이제 그걸 미리 막자는 겁니다.
Leading up to the forum, much of the attention centered on possible changes to the tax system. According to discussions by relevant ministries and public feedback gathered online, many argued that tax benefits for owners of high-value homes should be scaled back. Currently, single home owners can receive the same maximum property tax deduction regardless of how much their home is worth. With the government still working out where to draw the line, Thursday's discussion focused on how ultra-high-value homes should be defined.
I think owner-occupied homes should be protected, but using the national average home price of 500 million won, or roughly $340,000 as the benchmark would be too low. Around twice the national average would be more appropriate.
If the threshold is set at an officially assessed value of 3 billion won, or $2 million, it would apply to about 0.3% of all homes nationwide, or roughly 50,000 households.
Beyond this threshold, participants also debated how the tax burden should differ depending on factors such as owner occupancy and multi-home ownership. President Lee suggested first setting a standard property tax for a typical single-home owner.
1주택에 대해서 기본을 정한 다음에 실거주 또 거주 용도일 경우에는 감해주고 그게 또 예를 들면 서민용 또는 중산층용이라 그러면 좀 보호하는 측면에서 또 약간 감해주고 이렇게 좀 정리할 수 있을 것 같고 또 지방 이런 데도 또 배려해주고.
Housing supply was another major focus. Lee said the government is working to cut delays in housing construction by more than half, including for large-scale government-led projects outside Seoul. Based on what was discussed, the government is expected to announce new housing measures later this month. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Preliminary findings by the central bank show the South Korean economy expanded 0.6% in the second quarter of this year on the back of solid exports. Our Kim Jun-hong reports.
Korea's economy in the second quarter grew 0.6% compared to the previous quarter on the back of strong exports. That's according to advanced data on the country's real gross domestic product, or GDP, released by the Bank of Korea on Thursday. Defying concerns over the mounting impact of the war in the Middle East, Korea's economy maintained solid momentum, powered by robust semiconductor exports.
Continued strength in the semiconductor sector and the limited impact of the Middle East conflict were the main factors. Government efforts to stabilize energy supplies and diversify imports also helped cushion the economy.
The reading beat the Bank of Korea's May forecast by 0.4 percentage points. Although the pace slowed from the first quarter's 1.8% pace, the central bank said the economy continues to show solid growth momentum. It noted that growth typically weakens sharply after a strong quarter, but this time the economy defied that pattern. Private spending rose 0.4%, while government spending increased 0.2%. Facilities investments also increased on stronger demand for chip-making equipment, but construction investment fell. Exports climbed 1.4%, led by semiconductors, while imports rose 0.8%, led by autos and machinery. Domestic demand and net exports each contributed 0.3 percentage points to growth. The central bank said the two made balanced contributions to the expansion.
Many had expected second quarter growth to rely largely on exports, but domestic demand and net exports contributed in equal measure, while private consumption and facilities investment continued to strengthen.
Real gross domestic income, or GDI, far outpaced GDP growth, up 15.6% on-year in the second quarter. This marked the fastest pace in 38 years, with stronger chip export prices boosting the terms of trade. The Bank of Korea said sustained gains in real GDI could translate into stronger domestic demand by boosting corporate investment and household spending. The Finance Ministry said on Thursday that strong second quarter growth has brightened the prospects of meeting the government's 3% annual growth target. Yet it cautioned that renewed conflict in the Middle East and U.S. tariffs remain downside risks. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
Top trade delegates from South Korea are in Washington, D.C. for talks on investment, tariffs and kupang. Our Park Jun-han explains.
Korea's Industry Minister Kim Jong-won arrived in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday to coordinate major economic priorities with top U.S. officials, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. At the top of the agenda is finalizing the first project under Korea's $200 billion investment pledge. Kim noted that discussions are focusing heavily on the energy sector to secure a stable cash flow, with an official announcement expected as early as late August. The visit comes at a critical moment as Washington prepares to transition from temporary global tariffs expiring this week to new measures under Section 301 of the U.S. Trade Act of 1974. Seoul is firmly emphasizing that the 15% tariff ceiling established under the bilateral trade agreement must be maintained. To aid way to these critical negotiations, Trade Minister Cho Hyun is also in Washington as he is expected to coordinate with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Another item on Minister Kim's agenda is U.S. political concerns over U.S.-listed e-commerce firm Coupang, with Seoul seeking to resolve misunderstandings before they escalate into broader trade friction. Some lawmakers in Washington claim the company faces discriminatory treatment in Korea, raising concerns that the issue could evolve into a broader trade issue.
We have continuously provided explanations regarding areas where there were some misunderstandings on the U.S. side. And I do not believe the Korea-U.S. alliance will be shaken by a single issue like this.
The industry minister's visit also highlights a deepening partnership in the maritime sector. With $150 billion out of Korea's $350 billion U.S. investment package going into shipbuilding, the move reflects a strong mutual commitment to rebuilding the maritime industry together, placing Korea at the center of this strategic partnership. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
Back here at home, the National Assembly is close to finalizing the formation of its standing committee leadership for the second half of this year. During a plenary session on this Thursday, lawmakers elected chairs for 6 standing committees on education, foreign affairs, trade, health, transport and intelligence. Now, only the chair for the Gender Equality Committee needs to be elected, as the initial nominee withdrew her candidacy. This post is likely to be filled next week to complete this parliamentary process 61 days after the sessions for the second half of the year began on May 30th. The ruling Democratic Party had earlier appointed committee chairs for 11 standing committees, including the Budget Committee and the Judiciary Committee. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun has urged North Korea to respond to South Korea's calls for dialogue, pointing out that peace is a bilateral effort. These words were shared at the ASEAN Regional Forum that includes the two Koreas over in Manila. Participants, for their part, voiced concern over North Korea's continued nuclear and missile development while stressing the need for denuclearization. Separately, at the ASEAN +3 meeting, including South Korea, Japan and China, Minister Cho called for broader partnership to ensure food and energy security amid supply chain disruptions stemming from tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is reportedly planning to deploy heavy bombers against a key Iranian nuclear-related site, stoking fears for a greater escalation in violence in the Middle East. Our Lee Jae has the latest.
The United States has reportedly informed Israel that it plans to intensify its military campaign against Iran in the coming days, including possible strikes by heavy bombers on the Pickaxe Mountain site near the central Iranian city of Qom. According to the Times of Israel on Wednesday, the operation would mark the first use of U.S. heavy bombers against Iran since this year's joint U.S.-Israeli military campaign. The report said Washington notified Israel in advance as part of close security coordination, giving Israeli authorities time to prepare for a possible Iranian retaliation, including missile attacks. The report follows repeated warnings from U.S. President Donald Trump over the past week that the Pickaxe Mountain site would be targeted pretty soon.
Normally I wouldn't say that. If I thought they could do something about it, I would never say that. But we'll be hitting that area pretty soon. And very heavily.
President Trump also escalated his rhetoric on Wednesday, saying the United States would destroy an Iranian bridge or power plant every time Iran attacks a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, forcing Tehran to make a deal with the U.S.
This is with this skirmish we have with the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I call it that because, let me tell you, they're getting hit so hard, and they want to make a deal.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called on America's Asian partners to help safeguard shipping through the strategic waterway. Speaking in Manila while attending the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting on Wednesday, Rubio said it would be in the interest of Asian allies to deploy warships or other naval assets to ensure the safe passage of civilian vessels. When asked whether Washington has specifically requested countries such as South Korea to contribute military assets, Rubio said no such request had been made. However, he stressed that many Asian economies rely heavily on oil and natural gas from the Middle East, making freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz a shared strategic interest. Lee Jae, Arirang News.
And global oil prices continue to climb in response to the rising violence in the Middle East. Brent crude futures rose to $96 a barrel on Thursday, marking their highest in over 6 weeks. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude also surged some 2% to $88.5 a barrel. Market analysts believe persistent U.S. Iran tensions will maintain upward pressure on oil prices owing to supply uncertainties. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a defense bill that blocks any reduction in the size of American boots on the ground here in South Korea. In a close vote on Wednesday, the House approved the National Defense Authorization Act, a package worth over $1.1 trillion for the upcoming fiscal year. The bill bans funds from being used to reduce U.S. forces Korea below its current level of 28,500 troops. The legislation addresses lingering speculation that the U.S. administration might adjust force posture in South Korea to better counter a rising China or other global security challenges. A city that became a symbol of survival during the Korean War is now seeking global recognition. Our culture correspondent Cho Hyun files this report from Busan.
At first glance, it may look like an ordinary building in Busan. But during the Korean War, it formed part of the city that kept South Korea functioning when Seoul could no longer serve as the capital. What is now the Donghwa University Museum was once used as the wartime government's administrative headquarters. From here, state affairs continued as officials, refugees, and institutions relocated to Busan. Nearby, a special exhibition at the Busan Modern and Contemporary History Museum traces how the city was transformed during the war.
A war can cause a country to collapse and make normal life impossible. But Busan adapted its existing facilities so the government could continue operating, public administration could function, and refugees could rebuild their lives. That's the greatest historical value of the wartime capital of Busan.
This place is 국제시장, translated to international market. During the Korean War, this place became a vital marketplace for refugees, where they found relief supplies, imported goods, and everyday necessities. Today, 국제 market is one of Busan's busiest tourist attractions. But during the Korean War, it became a center for refugees as they tried to rebuild their lives. Just around the corner is Gangtong Market. Its name, meaning can market, dates back to the war when canned food from UN relief supplies and U.S. military rations was traded here. The story of Busan's wartime capital extends beyond its markets. Nearby, Yeongdo Bridge became a symbol of reunion and hope for families separated by the war. As the only UN cemetery in the world, the United Nations Memorial Cemetery stands as a lasting reminder of the international forces that fought in defense of South Korea. Together, these places tell the story of how Busan kept a nation running through war. It was where the government continued to operate, refugees built new lives, and the international community came together during one of Korea's most difficult times. Korea plans to submit the wartime capital of Busan Heritage for UNESCO World Heritage inscription in 2029. 정혜림, Arirang News, Busan.
And South Korea welcomed almost 2 million foreign tourists last month. According to the Korea Tourism Organization, June's number was up over 23% on year. Chinese travelers accounted for the largest number of visitors, with some 650,000. Findings for the first half of this year show over 10.7 million foreign travelers were here in South Korea, up more than 21% on year. Meanwhile, with security and economic concerns reshaping East Asia, the region's policymakers are here in South Korea for talks aimed at rebuilding trust and expanding cooperation. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Seoul has called for solidarity and flexible networks of practical cooperation in East Asia amid growing geopolitical and economic fragmentation. Speaking at the East Asia Cooperation Forum on Thursday, First Vice Foreign Minister Park Eun-joo pointed to intensifying power politics, nationalism and protectionism, alongside demographic change, industrial restructuring and risks from AI.
As the world's most dynamic and innovative region, East Asia continues to hold enormous potential. Once again, it is time to gather our collective wisdom and steadfast commitment as we navigate the era of the uncertainty.
The combined gross domestic product of Korea, Japan and China came to more than $24 trillion in 2024, roughly a fifth of global output. But historical and territorial disputes, different political systems and competing security alignments continue to limit cooperation. The leaders of the three countries last met in May 2024, reviving the trilateral summit after a hiatus of more than 4 years. The next summit remains uncertain, however, amid a sharp deterioration in Japan-China relations over Taiwan and continued rivalry between the United States and China, creating ideological and institutional bifurcation. Experts stress the need to seek common ground.
Try to reach some common understanding as to how to manage the conflicts in the region, such as territorial disputes. And as far as China is concerned, China hopes that we would have a code of conduct in the South China Sea as soon as possible. Also, the countries should probably look more closely at the interests, shared interests and stakes, and try to cooperate on these issues, ranging from trade, investment, and how to regulate AI development. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Korea and Japan are very, very dependent on China still. Even though there are some sensitive areas in which we have to be more careful, but and I think that will continue for the foreseeable future. So the trick is to how to manage these sensitive issues. And
another question was how to prevent economic security measures and technological development from hardening into rival regional blocs and even AI warfare. Participants said Korea could use its middle power position to convene and bridge regional differences.
We normally say that non-traditional security issues, such as AI or public health or climate change, those issues are relatively easier to build up cooperation among those three countries. So.
In the face of an increasingly uncertain geopolitical and economic landscape, participants here say that sustained dialogue and practical cooperation will be essential to tackling shared challenges and building a more resilient future together. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And in other news, Samsung Electronics has unveiled its latest Galaxy devices in London, putting foldable phones and AI-powered features at the center of its newest push to redefine the mobile experience. Our Kim Bo-kyung has a glimpse.
Over 1,000 journalists and trendsetters worldwide gathered at Old Billingsgate, a former fish market along the River Thames, overlooking London's iconic Tower Bridge, to have a peek of Samsung Electronics' Galaxy Unpacked event. The audience applauded as the Galaxy Z Fold 8 was unveiled. It looked like a passport with 5.5-inch cover screen with a 10:16 aspect ratio when folded. It could be switched to a 7.6-inch screen with a 4:3 aspect ratio when unfolded. Weighing only a little over 200 grams, the Galaxy Z Fold 8 is the lightest Galaxy Z Fold ever, while also offering better battery capacity.
Today, we bring more choices to power the next era of intelligence. These are the most powerful, most versatile, and most adaptive foldables we've ever introduced.
Samsung has also expanded its foldable smartphone lineup to 3 models, adding the Galaxy Z Fold 8 Ultra alongside the Fold 8 and Flip 8. The Fold 8 Ultra weighs only 215 grams, and it is just 4.1 millimeters thick when unfolded, making it the thinnest fold model the company has produced. Flip 8, designed for maximum portability, targets younger consumers with a focus on AI-powered experiences.
It's really nice because it's like fitting to the bag or to trousers, so I'm in love actually, and I'm wondering if it's the quality of the camera will be like better.
Galaxy Watch Ultra 2 and Watch 9 were also unveiled. The Ultra 2 focuses on outdoor performance, while the Watch 9 emphasizes 24/7 personalized health monitoring. Co-developed with Google for the first time, Samsung's smart glasses that are scheduled to launch later this year were shown too, equipped with a built-in camera allowing users to capture what they see and access AI-powered features in real time. Pre-orders for the Galaxy foldable smartphones and smartwatches will begin in South Korea on July 28th, followed by a global rollout starting August 7th. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Today marks Taeseol, the traditional solar term known as the hottest time of the year. Monsoon rain is sticking around across the central regions, while intense heat continues across much of the south. Following the southern regions, parts of the capital area, including Seoul, are now under a heat advisory. The sweltering weather will continue tomorrow, with high humidity making it feel even hotter. A stationary front will keep bringing rain for a little while longer. Northern parts of the central regions could pick up as much as 80 millimeters through today. That said, there'll also be plenty of breaks in the rain, and rainfall totals will vary quite a bit from one place to another. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 24 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon 23, Daegu 26 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 29 degrees, Daegu 35, and Busan 32 degrees. Looking ahead, monsoon rain will continue across the central region through early next week. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon a new set of U.S. tariffs as the existing ones expire this week.